Pick your class and
earn your battle points.
Because it's time for the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Welcome to episode 188 of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by SammyBoiii, SplitScreen, Ethan Clark, aka Dangercat, Ark3ros, and RogueWolfe.
Hello, everyone.
Hello there.
Hi there.
Hello there.
I can't believe I said hi there instead of hello there.
That's obviously
Just have to be different. In this power-packed episode, we're talking about our new project, Star Wars Wayfinder, the state of the game so far, and what we'd like to see going forward. So, let's get started. So let's get started with what exactly is Wayfinder?
So Wayfinder is the first, I believe, network for Star Wars creators. It's a group of Star Wars creators that we believe are exceptional at what they do, passionate individuals, people that possibly have niche coverage of a game or a movie or something. They don't have to be big in the community. They just need to be very good at what they do. Passionate individuals like the people in this podcast right now. We've got a Battlefront podcast, which we're on now, who obviously they do the podcast portion of it, and that's what they're good at. And we have RogueWolfe, who's very good at he covers a very niche part of the community, which is what I like. He's got quite a small focus on what he does, but it's a lot of informational stuff about Starfighter content.
Yeah, we kind of all have our own little niche.
Yeah, I mean, there's Ark as well. You know, he's out there. You know, well known in the community. You know, a lot for his captures as well. You know, we've all. Yeah. I think what's nice, especially about this little group we've got going on in this podcast right now, is we all do similar things, but at the same time, we also cover a nice broad range of content as well. Which I think, for purposes of this, it's just really great to kind of have all these different views and opinions.
What I really like is the drive to quality that we have in the group. That's something I mentioned to you, SammyBoiii, when I started doing YouTube videos. I was looking at your videos and I was like, oh, that's a quality I want to achieve with my stuff. Looking at the way you brand your stuff, the graphics, the content you put out, especially your tutorials, because tutorials are kind of my thing. That's what I do for a living, actually. That's what I really enjoy. And I mean, we've only just begun and I learned so much already.
There's so much we have to learn from each other and our experiences within the community. And in the end, it can only better us. There's nothing, even if Wayfinder doesn't turn out to be that successful, at the end of it, everyone that's involved comes out as a better content creator than they were before.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, we've all learned from everyone. You know, there's a lot to learn.
I feel like we've already learned a lot, even though we haven't really even gotten started yet. So,
as for what Wayfinder is, I think the closest comparison would be something like Rooster Teeth or the Yogscast, where we have like a sort of centralized brand where we run social media accounts that do news, have collaborative content. Like we're hoping to have a Wayfinder YouTube channel where we do some video content and regular live streams where we all come together and talk and play games, and possibly even a website off in the future. But that's a pipe dream. We don't know about that yet. But as a purely on the sort of like more operational side, creators that join us will get assistance with things like sponsorships, branding, merch designs, editing, and community management. So it's basically a place where creators can come to focus on what they do best, which is making the content, and where they don't necessarily have to worry about any of what a lot of content creators might consider the boring stuff, which is, all the brand deals and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what Wayfinder is.
I think collaboration is a great part of it, as well as tips and tricks. You may know something that I don't know, and vice versa. And helping each other out is a great part of that as well. We've talked a little bit about who we've got involved. We've got Ethan, we've got RogueWolfe, Ark3ros, SammyBoiii, SplitScreen, myself, Battlefront Podcast, but we have so much more too. We've got Battlefront Captures as well as Elliot. Ethan, would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so obviously not everyone could be on the podcast today, but
it would be madness.
yeah, it would be absolute madness and a pain to edit. But we have quite a wide range of creators on board already. They're mostly Star Wars creators. We have one that isn't a Star Wars creator per se, but I really liked him, so I invited him anyway. As of today, the day we're recording this, we have Ark3ros Cinematic Captures, RogueWolfe, SammyBoiii, SplitScreen, Battlefront Podcast, Battlefront Updates, RogueWolfe, Elka Gaming, and Tombi. That's our lineup.
Big lineup.
Does sound like Avenger if you put it like that.
What am I to fear? The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Yes.
I'm super excited about what we've got coming up, especially in such... Battlefront so far has been in a pretty good place in terms of support. We've been getting pretty much consistent updates. Communication has been pretty good so far as well. What is everyone's thoughts on the state of the game so far since we really got that push on communication with Benoit coming in?
I think nobody saw it coming, really. At least I felt like the game was somewhat doomed from the start. So just seeing how they keep pushing out content still to this day, it's amazing, really.
The support for this game has gone way beyond what I initially thought it would. Before the game came out, they said the game was going to be a live service, and we sort of expected the content to go on for a while. Mm-hmm. But then the whole launch fiasco happened, and that pretty much killed most of the hype. People weren't so... what's the word? Not enthusiastic. Maybe, yeah, enthusiastic could be the word. There was that sort of period of quietness where nothing really came out of DICE. You know, just after the December, the last Jedi like content drop.
January to early March sort of period. It was very quiet.
There was radio silence pretty much. We didn't really have a community manager, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it didn't feel like
Yeah, because Sledgehammer was going out.
I think we had one, but they just weren't saying anything about the game.
Yeah, I think they... Like, I don't really know what happened, but I assume that he must have sort of known that it wasn't for him, and he kind of must have, you know, slowed down his workload in that area, I guess, because it was... For a long time, it was kind of pretty dead silent, really. I remember it around the time the progression update came, which was, March...
it was March.
I think like February before that, it was just like we didn't hear anything at all. So yeah, it was pretty. It did seem, like Ark said, it did seem pretty doomed at that point.
And that was not long before the solo update dropped, right?
Yeah, that was about 2 to 3 months before, I think.
Yeah, so the progression system dropped in March, and then solo part 1 was in May with like Hero Showdown and Champs Palace, and the solo part 2 was June with like Kessel and the legendary skins and stuff like that.
I remember I was watching the EA Play live stream with my friend Boxip, and we were watching the live stream on a Discord call, and Dennis came onto the stage and started talking about Battlefront. The feeling of Don't be surprised. The feeling of disappointment that I got when they showed Castle on the screen was like insane. Like I thought they were just going to come on, talk about what they've done. You know, we've done the progression system. We brought out Castle, and that was going to be it. But then they absolutely blew our minds with the Clone Wars announcement. I've never screamed in a Discord call before, but I did scream that day. I was so excited.
Brilliant. Yeah, I remember that day so well. I'd literally just finished playing a cricket match or something, and the EA Play announcement was probably just after my brother was at home. The match finished. Checked my phone, saw General Grievous, and I was so happy. I called my brother and everything. It was just, it's going to be a day I'm going to remember for a long time, to be honest.
I literally remember that like it was yesterday.
It was like Christmas. That's what it felt like.
It really was. Felt like I was a little kid on Christmas.
Which of the 4 heroes were you most excited about when they announced them?
Probably Grievous.
Yeah, for me it was Grievous.
Probably,
Grievous.
Just the fact of how different he was, and he's the only one who wasn't. He's not a human, so he was kind of like, I don't know, just the different nature of him. Was the most exciting.
Will he use 2 swords or 4? Was the main thing.
Yeah, that was a big discussion. I remember.
Yeah, I actually do remember that.
Yeah, a lot of speculation videos back then, right?
Oh yeah, the speculation videos. That sort of goes back to what Wayfinder is about. There was a lot of like baseless and wild speculation about what was coming to the game.
Ahsoka.
And Ahsoka only, and that's still
Ahsoka win
for AD.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you're talking about 2018 or 2020. Still the same.
They're interchangeable. Yeah.
Maybe he's talking about the future,
2021, Ahsoka's still being wanted.
Yeah.
The funny thing is,
been working on it for a long time.
I actually went back for a video to a developer Q&A Dennis Brandwald did back at the beginning of 2019. I'm not sure. It might be the December 2018, where he was talking about the plans they had for the game, and you could still feel the frustration that he didn't have the time or the manpower to put this in place. And to look back at it now, I think he can be pretty happy with himself, what he achieved.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. They've come so far since then.
I'm really happy for the team. I mean, imagine working on this actually and, having your work ruined like this by a launch that had problems kind of blown out of proportion a little bit, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Just look at the base maps we got, like Naboo, or especially if you kind of explore them in arcade on a PC with a mod that removes the boundaries, the detail, even if you go out far, is just
Absolutely.
It's absolutely amazing.
Mind blowing, yeah.
To have all this work you did for so many years overshadowed by this, and then actually pull out of it and make it a success. And I mean, especially when it comes to live service, I mean, DICE has this other game, Battlefield 5. Its fans are not very happy with the live service, I think. And so who would have thought back then that Battlefront 2 would be actually an exemplary for how to do a live service for a game.
Yeah, Battlefield and Battlefront kind of switched like places, really.
Definitely.
Battlefield 1 was really, handled pretty well. And then Battlefront 2, obviously, the launch wasn't great. And then really in about a year, they just completely switched, which is, like, it's good for us, but it's obviously the other half of the community is probably not too happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing I've been wondering. What do you guys think about the game going forward from here? I mean, it's so uncharted territory. We talked about it in the Discord earlier. After the Celebration Edition, if you play a niche mode, you can actually have a pretty good barometer of player count, because all of a sudden Starfighter lobbies were populated again, and you could even, find Hero Starfighter games on PC every once in a while. So lots of new players, and I'm just curious. I quoted this interview I mentioned, like in 2019, Dennis Brandwald said, we want to support our games for much longer, but how much longer is this for Battlefront 2? I'm really curious. What do you think?
As far as I'm aware, they plan to support it throughout 2020. I mean, that's what they said last year, right? They said, but
they mentioned the start of 2020. I don't know if they ever really put in concrete 2020, but I think officially it was like March was the kind of like, well, we know we're going to get to March. After that, we have some things we want to announce, kind of thing.
We'll see.
It's interesting because a lot of games are moving towards the live service, and it's fascinating to see more games launching. Like Overwatch has been around for 5 years. We've got Rainbow Six Siege that's been around for 5 years.
Rainbow Six Siege is a really good example, yeah.
And like I think that's the one I always point to is Rainbow Six Siege, because it's such a powerful example of something that's been supported for so long with such high quality content.
And the thing is too, with Siege, it actually had a terrible launch too. It actually really bummed out for the first year, and then look at it now, it's still going strong. So it can be done.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, I mean, Rainbow Six has been going on for, I think literally within the last week or two, they started season 5, like chapter 1 or whatever, like Void Edge or something. And you look at that, and then you kind of look at Battlefront, and I think with the vast amount of Star Wars content that there is, within these 3 eras, I think, they can tap into things like Rebels, Clone Wars, Resistance, and all the other films and so on. I think there is so much content they can go and push out into Battlefront 2, but it's whether or not they want to kind of develop the game further or develop something further and maybe put it into Battlefront 3 in a couple of years down the line. But it's just, I think the potential for this game is very, very big.
Same here.
I think the potential's there, but one of the key differences between Battlefront and the other games that you just talked about, Siege and Overwatch, is that they're both very different in scope. Battlefront is a much larger game than those games, and if you think, they'll make a new map for Siege, but in Battlefront, that one new map might be the size of 10 Siege maps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
100%.
I think that Battlefront, while a live service can work for it, and there's a lot of stuff to tap into, the frequency or the amount of content that we're going to get is never going to match that of Overwatch or Siege.
Of course.
Yeah, for sure.
Just purely because of the amount of time and effort it's required, is required to make one piece of content for Battlefront,
and the different layers
absolutely.
it has to go through. Because I mean, Rainbow Six Siege is like, let's make this map, and it's like, okay. Battlefront, you have to like, okay, we're thinking about this map. Let's go to Lucasfilm and see if that's something that we can do.
Yeah, the approvals is.
And then it has to go through all of these different levels before it's like, okay, we can make this. Especially with the heroes.
That is very true.
I remember Dennis saying in an interview sometime last year, I think he was basically asked what, it might have actually been a Game Changer interview sometime last year, and he was basically asked what the kind of most painful thing is, and he was saying that approvals is kind of the most annoying side of things, really, because I think if they didn't have to do any of these approvals, then I think time, in terms of timings of things or freedom to create, would probably be a little bit, I don't think better's the right word for it, but it's kind of, you'd get a bit more leeway with it, is kind of where I'm trying to go with it. It's just, it takes up so much time.
Yeah, there's been a lot of like updates, not heaps, but maybe like 3 or 4 updates that have had to be delayed. Or sorry, I should say CTs that have had to be delayed because they aren't, given approval to give that information yet. And even though a CT is not, it's not the end of the world if we can't get the information when we want it, but it's still just those tiny little things. I think that's a lot of the issues that Battlefront has. It's not so much the large stuff, it's more the tiny little details that sort of get the community pretty annoyed. So
yeah,
those sort of approvals, I think, even just with something as small as a CT, it seems like it does have a pretty big effect.
I do prefer the, when they put out a giant CT that just has everything in an update, as opposed to what they used to do before, where they would put out, say, like 4 CTs a month. That would break everything down into smaller pieces. I didn't enjoy that. I like getting the big content drop that I can go through and read.
Yeah. No, I agree. I didn't mind it, but it was kind of, you've got to see, let's go back to December or at least, no, January. So it'd be like, with the January, obviously that turned into early February with BB-8 and BB-9E and so on. So it'd be like they'd have a CT on the 2 heroes, then they'd have a CT just on Supremacy and stuff like that. It's just, I feel like, it is so much more enjoyable, and I think from an organisational point of view on their part, it's just probably easier and just nicer just to have it all in one big document that everyone can just go and read through.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the idea of the smaller CTs was possibly to, obviously from a marketing standpoint, you want the game to have publicity, and if you spread out CT's worth of content over 4 weeks, then you sort of have that same publicity but spread over a month. That there's constant attention with all these news drops and things. But for a consumer standpoint, like for us as players, it doesn't really feel very rewarding, I guess. Or maybe that's the wrong word.
I feel like it's the excitement just dwindles a little bit, because it's like we get a piece of news, it's like, oh yeah, great, I'm really happy with that, and then it's like a week later, more news, and it's like, yep, come on, and then it gets to the following week, it's like a third CT, and it's like, can we just please have the update now?
Consider it, like, imagine if they did the Clone Wars announcement, but instead of announcing all of it at once, they were just like, sometime next year you're going to get General Grievous, and everyone would be like, oh, that's really cool, but then a month later they announce everyone, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. It would have been cool if you did it at the same time, though.
Yeah, and they waited to announce, like, Supremacy until, like, the last second to be like, no.
Do you think the next generation of consoles plays a part here with the future of Battlefront?
I do, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too.
Kind of, I did think that Battlefront 2 would get support for, well, I don't want to say I thought it, but I was hoping that it would get support for, say, 5 or so years. Games like Overwatch and that have done it, so... But I honestly think their best option would be to make Battlefront 3 on the next-gen consoles, and then make that the one that firstly has a good launch and has,
learn from their
tries
mistakes.
To correct the issues, stuff like better saber combat and all that kind of thing, private matches, all that stuff that we've been wanting. Launch with all of that, and then have 4 or 5 years worth of really good content that's just content. They don't need to add the squad system, they don't need to add Supremacy, they don't need to do that kind of stuff, and they can focus on maps and heroes and stuff like that. That's what I would say is. I mean, I'm not I don't work for DICE, so I don't know, but that's what I would imagine is the smartest option, is to release a more powerful game on a next gen console and then make that the focus rather than Battlefront 2. But I would be very pleased if Battlefront 2 was this, still the focus as well.
That's the big question.
I feel like with the Celebration Edition, I feel like that's sort of what they were thinking about when they released it. Maybe they were just testing the waters to see if there was still interest in a Battlefront game. If people were still hungry for that type of game.
Mm-hmm. And it blew away expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, the player base from December to January doubled. So in January we had double the players we had in December, and that was like a 2-year high. I think that was similar numbers to January 2018. So like it was absolutely insane.
If I remember correctly as well, it actually made it into the top 5.
It did.
In December for Xbox and PlayStation. And that was among new games that had just released as well.
There was one week where it was actually above games like God of War and Red Dead and Call of Duty and all that, which doesn't very often happen.
That's just insane.
And considering this is a 2-year game that had a bad launch as well, like that's really impressive.
Yeah, you don't see Overwatch coming up there at the top and stuff like that. You don't see Siege being the most popular.
Exactly, and you're starting to see these more popular streamers going back and being like, "Oh my gosh, Battlefront's completely changed." Like Jack Frags recently did like a live stream and with like what was it, the update that added supremacy on the sequel trilogy maps. And that got tons of views. We're seeing these changes in the community where you can say, "Oh yeah, I make YouTube videos on Battlefront," and you're, instead of getting like, "Oh, that crap game," you get, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah.
Which is definitely a change. And like my brother and I were just talking about this, about the next gen consoles. That's going to be very interesting to see how that affects things, because they're setting it up to where you're, at least Xbox side, it'll be up to EA to decide if they want to port it over very easily, because all of the Xbox games are backwards compatible.
It's a no-brainer, right?
PlayStation 5 will have backwards compatibility with PS4 as well.
Yes.
Yeah, they said
Just
they're
PS4.
releasing the top 100 titles, which I would imagine Battlefront 2 would be in there.
Yes, I would think so too.
It'd be a no-brainer from EA's part to do that, in my opinion. If they didn't, the game just ends. Like, there's no one's really going to play it at that point.
Personally, I think that the Celebration Edition was probably the most important event for Battlefront 2. I mean, a lot of people might say that was the progression update, that fixed all the wrongs or whatever. But I think from someone that loves Star Wars and Battlefront, the Celebration Edition was the single most important, not update, but thing that's happened to Battlefront, because it sort of validates or at least my vision of what Battlefront is.
Yes.
I absolutely agree.
It did seem like that was part of you kind of touched on that a little bit. It seemed like that was maybe their goal, to kind of test either, one, it does really well and they can keep supporting it, or two, if it doesn't do that well, here's the final edition of the game and this is what it is now. So it kind of, either way, there was no losing with that whole event, really.
Yeah, because I think with the Celebration Edition, it was kind of like, well, we've just had a year, like we've just had a really good year. A lot of people coming back, and it's just, it's been great, but do we still have that momentum going forward or not? And I think obviously with the Celebration Edition launching the way it did, and obviously having all these players come back, IGN re-reviewing it from a 6.5 to an 8.8, it shows that it's still got legs to stand on and can keep on running, really.
The publisher EA was very happy with it as well. If you look at their last conference call, they mentioned the Celebration Edition overachieved by a lot, actually exceeded their expectations in terms of sales.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
It's like, yes, finally.
So Ethan has a very good point, actually. It's very good that they could actually prove that, yes, they could fix, or they have fixed, this public perception of Battlefront. And like you mentioned, so many big YouTubers playing Battlefront now. I think yesterday I saw a video by Shroud playing as BB-8 in Battlefront. That was amazing. I mean, and he had lots of fun with it too.
I think the difference since then has been night and day. In game, before you would go and search for a HUV match, for example, and you could be sat there for 30 seconds to 5 minutes looking for a match. Even up till like September, November last year, which was okay. I didn't mind that, because there was still a healthy core player base. After the Celebration Edition, there was no waiting times, and there still isn't now. Like you might be waiting for max 5 or 10 seconds before you get into a full lobby, and I think that's just.
It really is.
And I could see it on my channel as well. So many people looked for my tutorial all of a sudden. I have this one Starfighter tutorial up, and that gets most of the views on my channel, and it was like exploding around December. And
I noticed a lot of older tutorials started doing really well all of a sudden.
Especially like since EA hasn't really updated their website in terms of that kind of front, I really think the highlights are the YouTube videos that are coming out. Like we've got Rogue here, who has this very niche, high-quality videos on the front of Starfighter Assault, which I think is still like it's one of the most robust aspects of Battlefront.
Yeah, for sure. But I feel like it's lacking with the content though still.
Definitely.
Yeah, I won't argue with that one.
Yeah, I'm not a big Starfighter player. I don't particularly enjoy it that much. That's just a personal thing. I have nothing against people that like Starfighters in Battlefront, but I don't think it's fair to them that they don't get as much content as the players of other game modes, like most of us.
It's something that kind of is connected to the fate of Battlefront as well. I think there were different plans for this. And this developer Q&A I mentioned back from 2018, I think December 2018, Dennis actually confirmed that there were new maps in the making for the mode.
Yes.
Said flying maps are absolutely coming. And then the launch happened. And then, all these games that were in development that got cancelled by EA. If you look at this article by Jason Schreier, the gaming journalist from Kotaku, who recently reported on a Battlefront spin-off that got cancelled. Apparently, Criterion was working on that with, I think, Respawn. No, not Respawn. EA Montreal. Oh, that's it. EA Montreal they had a Battlefront spin-off in the making, and Criterion was part of it. My guess is if Criterion was in on it, that it had something to do with Starfighters or vehicles at least. That got cancelled. Now we have Project Maverick, which has me hopeful, of course, again. We'll see a new Starfighter game. And very excited about it. If you saw my video, you could tell. But we still know very little about it. So
I know there's like a big rumor or want in the community is Criterion to make a basically pod racer-esque game.
Oh yes,
that would be fun.
I would love that.
I'm buying everything Criterion makes.
Exactly.
What sort of angle do you think they'd take? Because I think if they went down the obvious route of having, like a Need for Speed style, or not an open world, but like a circuit-based racing game, I feel like it could be quite shallow. I feel like pod races are kind of hard to make an entire game out of.
I feel like it would be a very one-dimensional game. There surely wouldn't be too much depth in terms of like a storyline, and the gameplay would mostly just be flying a pod racer. That's I can't imagine
pod racing.
yeah.
Now this is pod racing.
I think what everyone is hoping for, at least the people in my community, the Starfighter community, is a game that actually, like Rogue Squadron or X-Wing versus TIE Fighter type of game that comes with the story but with the multiplayer as well. Has maybe some open world aspects to it. You can see a little bit of this in the Old Republic, for example. So this type of game is something I think Starfighter fans are hoping for. One that focuses on Starfighters again and has the backbone of a story and a solid multiplayer.
A standalone Starfighter game could definitely do really well, and I think that would be really good for the people that have come to Battlefront and found that there isn't that much to do with Starfighters, as good as the gameplay might be, just to give them their own game that they can play, so that at least then DICE can focus on Battlefront.
Yeah, not neglect a part of their game.
Yeah, because it feels like, they've got this portion of the game that they're neglecting. And I understand why. I understand that Starfighter Assault and Hero Starfighters are just not very popular game modes. So it's somewhat justifiable from a developer point of view. But if these people had their own game, I wouldn't be so upset about DICE ignoring those fans.
In terms of like the canceled Star Wars games, my theory is it has less to do with EA and more to do with Lucasfilm, because I mean, even with Fallen Order, which was a huge success, Lucasfilm was trying to get them to make a bounty hunter game, and Respawn was like, no, this game's going to be lightsaber, and had to fight for that to happen. And I really think that aspect of it has a big reason why all of these Star Wars games are getting cancelled.
I mean, that's why Disney got EA on board, right? It's because EA, whether you like it or not, they're very good at making games, and they know they generally know what people want. If you look at Lucasfilm's history with video games, I mean, sure, they had some good games over the years. They had the original Battlefront, KOTOR and everything. If you look at Lucasfilm's history with video games, they seem kind of, to me, it feels like they think of it as a very secondary or tertiary sort of thing that they do.
Mm-hmm.
They make some very knuckle-headed decisions along the way as well.
There was the whole announcement for like the book era and comic book era where they were hyping it up so much it seemed like it was going to be a video game, and then it was comics and books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Lucasfilm doesn't know exactly what Star Wars fans want.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I would agree with that.
Lucasfilm is more into serving the loudest part of their fan community rather than the people who are invested in gameplay. Like one of the highlights of Fallen Order was, yes, its story, but also the very powerful and great gameplay aspect of it. I mean, it's Respawn. They have been the golden child of EA since Titanfall 1, and I think they should give more freedom to that team because they're just so great at what they do.
They really haven't produced a bad game so far. Or everything they've released has been really, really well done.
Let them do their thing and fight Lucasfilm to make their idea.
Lucasfilm surely trusts Respawn by now, right? I mean,
yeah,
they sort of went out on a limb and said, okay, we'll let you make what you want. And it turned out to be more successful than they thought. So surely that means now that Respawn has that creative freedom to sort of do whatever they want with their Star Wars license.
So we had the mention of a new way to play offline. What do you guys think what do you think that's going to be?
I personally feel like it'll either be like offline co-op or offline Galactic Assault, I feel like, because it says in the files there was this whole missions thing. It said missions attack or missions defense. So I feel like it could either be, you're playing Galactic Assault but offline, or co-op but offline, but I feel like it would make more sense to be offline Galactic Assault, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think if they can do that, then especially instant action, people who mainly play single player, and essentially, if you don't have, if you're playing on Xbox or PS4 and you don't have, PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live, because you can play instant action and you could essentially have Galactic Assault in there, I feel like that would be incredible for offline players.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting, something along those lines. Some one of the game modes added to offline would be greatly appreciated for the offline community. Something else I would love to see alongside that would be split screen.
Hello.
Where you can play split screen too.
Who doesn't like a split screen, right?
Choose your words carefully.
Like, I think that would be such a fun addition, because oftentimes I'll jump into an instant action game just for fun, and I'm always like, man, I wish I could play split screen with my brother.
Yeah, see, this is where kind of the name almost came about for me, actually, because me and my brother always used to play split screen Battlefront 1, Battlefront 2, and
yes.
I mean, we're identical twins anyway, so there's kind of like the biology behind identical twins, which also plays a part in it. But we used to play split screen we had a PlayStation 2, and we used to play split screen Lego games or Battlefront, and that's kind of where my name's mostly come about, is because of those previous experiences we had, and the fact that we used to be able to do this in the original Battlefronts all the time, to not be able to do that right now, apart from in one very specific part of the game, is a real shame. And I think if they can go and do that, then it would be absolutely incredible. I mean, we've both got we've got a PS4 each in the game, so like we can play together, but
it's not the same.
That's not going to be the same, and obviously not everyone will have that. So it's just, it'd be nice if they can go and do that, because I think it would please a lot of players, for sure.
Nothing beats sharing a bowl of popcorn and then screen peeking with your brothers or friends.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
It's something I'd love for my children as well, because they're 10 and 11, and they like Star Wars. They're hardcore Star Wars fans. And I'd totally love to play replay certain parts of the movie with them in split screen, and not just like running around, and that's something I'd enjoy very much. And I wouldn't want them to play online with me, because in my opinion they're too young for that, but to be able to play something like that with them. And I think Dennis Brentford, the design director, has kids around the same age, if I'm not mistaken, and he kind of mentioned something like that as well. So who knows?
That's what Star Wars is all about, though, isn't it? It's a thing for everyone.
Definitely. And
if you can enjoy it with your kids, then I think that's just incredible. Like, I grew up. I think that's the same for all of us. We all grew up watching Star Wars as kids, probably with our parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I think going forward, it's really important that people like RogueWolfe can also do the same thing with their kids.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like for younger people as well, it could almost breed the next generation of Star Wars fans as well. People see Battlefront 2 and it's like, whoa, okay, like they might not necessarily be big Star Wars fans, but they play Battlefront 2 split screen offline with their dad or their mum or something like that, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's so much to this, and they watch the films, they're like, oh, massive Star Wars fans all of a sudden, and I think Battlefront 2 has that opportunity to be able to go and do that. I mean, with the online kind of immersion anyway, that's great, but obviously if you're maybe too young to play online, or you don't play online anyway, you're an offline player, then being able to have essentially Galactic Assault in the offline, with split screen, being able to do something like that with the family would be an amazing
I don't know, to be
experience.
honest, because for example, I haven't grown up with Star Wars at all. My parents aren't into it. And I've only really been a part of the Star Wars fandom since Battlefront 2015.
Okay.
I remember buying the game like half randomly, because I knew Star Wars. I had seen the movies maybe once or twice, and I kind of liked it, but not that much. I saw a trailer for Starfighter. I remember there was a really great trailer for a Starfighter game mode in Battlefront 2015, and that hyped me up so much about the game one day, and just by playing it so much and every day, and I just came to love Star Wars that way. So to me, it was actually Battlefront 2015 that brought me to the Star Wars fandom.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm.
That's an awesome way to get into the franchise.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I wonder if that's true for a lot of other Battlefront players as well. If they just picked up Battlefront because they saw that it was big, either on YouTube or whatever, or they just picked it up randomly at launch. And if they're now Star Wars fans, I'd really like to know if that's something that, if something like Battlefront has had that effect on a wider scale.
It's very interesting. I know with the way we got into it, our cousins, we didn't have a PlayStation. We were Nintendo people. We had GameCube. So I grew up playing like Rogue Squadron, like with Star Wars, but our cousins had a PlayStation 2 and they had both Battlefront 1 and 2. Anytime we went to go see them, we would play that game and like stay up all night playing it, wake up, play it some more. And then even to this day, like anytime we visit or they come up and visit us, we have backwards compatible on our Xbox 1 and 2 Battlefront. So we pop that in and play some more.
Fair enough. No, that's awesome, actually. That's really cool.
I miss those days of just staying up all night playing games with a friend, like a sleepover or something. Those are the days.
Yes,
there was one time in particular, me and my brother. So it was when we were in year 3. So I know to some people that would be really confusing, but we basically went to bed probably around 9 o'clock or something. We woke up at midnight, or I woke up at midnight, and my brother had just come into my room, and then he was like, oh, be quiet, let's go downstairs. So we literally went downstairs at midnight, and then until 6 a.m. on a school night, we were playing the original Battlefront 2, whether it was just Conquest or we played a lot of Heroes vs. Villains because that was actually my favourite mode back then, weirdly. But I really enjoyed that. And so having Heroes vs. Villains the way it is now in Battlefront 2017 kind of brings me back to those days, which is why I like it so much. But after playing 6 hours straight of Battlefront 2 in, when we were like 7 or 8, we then went on to Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, for about an hour and a half, and then went to school. But it's, it is moments like that it's, I do hold really dear to me. And I think it would be amazing for, whether it's kids or teenagers, even adults, playing through the night, having these Star Wars experiences. I think it's that kind of opportunity that Battlefront has, which I think is, really unique, especially with the Star Wars franchise.
Definitely. I love that. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Those moments in our childhoods where it was just like, yeah.
Absolutely, man.
Those are some wonderful moments. That's all for this episode of the Star Wars Battlefront podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please follow us on Twitter Wayfinder is at Wayfinder. You can go there for news on the game, further developments on the network, and some more great content. Battlefront Podcast is on Twitter at SWB Podcast. You can follow Ark3ros, and that is at Ark3ros. SammyBoiii is on Twitter at SammyBoiii with 3 I's YT. You can follow RogueWolfe at RogueWolfe824. You can follow Ethan at Dangercat, and you can follow SplitScreen at YT_SplitScreen. You can find the Battlefront Podcast on Instagram and TikTok as well. That is at SWB Podcast. You can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/Battlefront Podcast, or on PayPal, paypal.me/TieDyeSheep, TYEDYESHEEP. Another great free way to support the show is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you can leave a review. Thanks to you, we've got 100 reviews, and we'd love to hear more. It helps us out a ton. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/the Star Wars Battlefront Podcast, and you can reach us on email through battlefrontpodcast@gmail.com. Keep an eye out on our YouTube channel. Later this week, we've got a further collaboration coming soon. You can listen to the show on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify. Wherever you can find podcasts, you can find this show. As always, thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you. Thank you guys for coming on the podcast, and there's some awesome things coming up.
Absolutely.
I mean,
a
thank you for
pleasure,
having
man.
us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's been
That was
nice.
exciting.
Really good.
Yeah, this has been an absolute blast. I look forward to editing and figuring out how I'm going to sync everybody up.
100%, yeah.
Oh, should we do a sync mark now at the end? We just have to do it the wrong way around.
Yeah.
Does that work?
We can all try and sync up counting down.
God damn it.
So we'll see. 10, 9, 8,
8,
7,
7,
6,
6,
5, 4, 3,
3,
2,
2,
1.